I hope it's not going to be like this for a majority of the year, where I go see one movie one day and it's really great and entertaining and everything I wanted out of it, and then I see another movie that's either run-of-the-mill, meh, or retroactively is trying to destroy good memories of movies that I liked from the past. So, Zoolander 2. Now, maybe saying retroactively destroying memories of a movie I enjoyed from the past is a little harsh. It's not quite around the feelings I had around Dumb and Dumber 2. Honestly, Zoolander 2, the feeling I took away from sitting through that movie was a sequel to this is really lame. Is pretty much all I really kind of felt. Was like, man, this movie just sucks. Yeah, it was kind of harsh to say it's tarnishing the legacy of Zoolander. Because, yeah, that movie was stupid, but I can still rewatch that movie. I mean, they had it on Netflix, and I can still rewatch it, and there are parts about it that still are very funny to me, very hilarious. Even though, you know, based on the premise alone, it runs the risk of being very dated. And Zoolander, the original, is at certain times dated with some of its references, but at the same time, the characters in and of themselves and the actual story of the movie are engaging enough and funny enough to still stand the test of time, I feel. I believe there was a dedication at the end of this movie to, I believe, Ben Stiller's original writing partner on the first Zoolander, and he was very much responsible for creating some of the characters. I believe he passed away. I can't remember his name, and that sucks too. I'm sorry. Look up his name for me and let me know, and call me an asshole for not knowing his name. But I believe he passed away in 2004. I believe it's one of the reasons why Ben Stiller took so long to return to the character, was because he didn't quite feel ready. This feels really kind of removed from the reality or the world that Zoolander had established, and just goes wherever with it. And I can be all for comedies that just go off the rails and just be stupid and silly. Like, I like the second Anchorman, actually, but the reason why was because despite all the batshit and all the one-upping that was taking place in that movie, the first one had established pretty well that this was just a farce of a world that these characters were living in, and that the characters themselves were able to propel a lot of the comedy with just who they were and how they were responding to these situations, not lose any momentum, not lose any of their timing in the process. And that was a sequel that took forever to come to theaters too. But I feel that sequel did a far better job than what Ben Stiller's doing here with Zoolander 2. I laughed a couple of times in this movie, but it wasn't really towards anything that Zoolander or Hansel or, to a lesser extent, Mugatu were even doing in this movie. It was really just about kind of random stupid shit that would happen every once in a while. It happens like once, and you laugh at it, but then it's that balance of running the joke into the ground where you're like, okay, it's not funny anymore. Which is kind of a shame, because I like Ben Stiller movies. I like him as an actor. Like, when I see him in dramatic stuff too, I think he's really, good. Even his comedic stuff, I enjoy him in his own movies. I enjoy Tropic Thunder still. Again, another one that he wrote and directed and still holds up. And he's actually, I like him a lot in that, and as kind of the lead, I guess, even though he is overshadowed by supporting characters such as Robert Downey Jr. and Jack Black. But Zoolander was one of those instances where he was a likable enough lead, and sure, there would be moments where other characters would kind of steal the spotlight from him, but he was okay to maintain as a central lead for this story. Here, it kind of, the film almost screeches to a halt whenever he and Owen Wilson show up. There's stuff to like in the movie. Again, there are those just random stupid moments. The one thing that consistently got me laughing every time it happened was this recurring gag where Zoolander and Hansel have gone into hiding, gone their own separate ways. the Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Read Good, like on its second day apparently, crashed because it was made out of the materials that he built the model of it out of. So like rubber cement and like paper clips and matchsticks or whatever, apparently. Stupid, yeah, I know. But the center like collapses, kills Zoolander's wife, and disfigures Hansel, which I saw that joke coming a mile away, because if you see him in the trailers, you see his face is fine. And so when we cut to Hansel in 2016, he's like living in a deserted area with his orgy, and which is just a bunch of random people that he just like secluded himself with to have sex with all the time. Like there's a sumo wrestler there, there's a little elfin kid, like one or two supermodels, a chimney sweep, like it's stuff like that, like the random just stupid imagery. Like there's this Dick Van Dyke looking chimney sweep in the background every once in a while, and you just kind of chuckle at that. And Kiefer Sutherland is part of his posse. He's in seclusion. He wears like a weird like Phantom of the Opera mask that hides like this much of his face, because surprise, surprise, his horrible disfigurement is like a little scar. And as soon as I saw him, I'm like, oh, okay, that's going to be the joke. He's just going to have like this little itty bitty scar, and everyone's going to think like he's hideous. And sure enough, that was a joke. Telegraphed. But the one recurring joke with this orgy thing is that I guess the representative of the orgy is Kiefer Sutherland, who shows up, announces to Hansel that everyone in the orgy is pregnant with his children, including Kiefer Sutherland. And Kiefer Sutherland dramatically like flips out a pregnancy test, showing like, yeah, I'm expecting. Okay, that's kind of funny, but what keeps it kind of perpetually funny is that whenever the orgy reappears, it's always fronted by Kiefer, who plays like this very spurned lover. You just see it in his eyes, like tears start welling up in his eyes, and he's like, can't believe how you hurt us, Hansel. But it's Kiefer Sutherland saying this stuff. So that is where the comedy is coming from for me. It's just that it's all around badass Jack Bauer kind of just being like very, very emotional about being jilted by Hansel, essentially. And at the very end, he's like, I lost our baby, Hansel, or something like that. And it's just the fact that he's even committing to such a stupid idea makes me laugh. It's kind of like the way it was with Peter Dinklage in Pixels. There's no reason for him to be trying as hard as he is, but the fact that he is more entertaining than what actually, I guess, should be funny. So there's stuff like that. That was the one running gag in this whole movie that I actually found myself snickering at. There's a couple of other things that kind of work. Will Ferrell's Mugatu breaks out of prison, and he gathers a lot of the heads of fashion, like actual people in fashion, Tommy Hilfiger and Wangs, I can't remember. I'm not a fashion guy, clearly. Fingerless gloves. At one point, he just straight up calls out people and makes fun of them. Like, Tommy Hilfiger's like, what are you doing? You can't do this. And Mugatu's like, shut up, Hilfiger, asshole. Just random shit like that. I'm struggling to think of actual funny stuff that happens, because all that's filling up my head now is a lot of stuff that isn't funny. There's some points that are actually pretty good in the movie. Some actors are pretty good. I like the kid who plays his son in this, Derek Zoolander Jr. Nothing he does with Ben Stiller is actually laugh out loud funny to me. Because honestly, for as stupid as Derek Zoolander is, he comes off as just kind of mean-spirited. It's a little too mean-spirited for me to really get behind, even though I know Derek Zoolander is supposed to be an idiot. It's not a likable kind of idiocy in this. And it doesn't help that when he and Hansel are doing like back and forth shtick, it's not as funny as when they did it back in the day. There is this one character who is a very like contrarian type of figure, very hipster, very much like, I hate everything, but I'm gonna glorify everything as well that I hate. I think the intent is that he's supposed to be representing like the hipster generation of people who are like that, and it's supposed to be funny, but it really isn't funny, because he's like just this fast talking, like quick insulting guy. He's like, hey guys. He's got like a shirt that's a meme of Zoolander. He's like, I call Billy Zane or something like that is the meme. He's like, hey man, I heard you say that like 15 minutes ago and instantly made these shirts, man. So lame, so lame. You guys are pieces of shit. So lame, so lame. And it's supposed to be like funny that he's saying this, but it's not. I can't wait for someone to kill this asshole. And sure enough, when Mugatu does kill him, thank you, because that character is annoying. That's really not funny. That's painfully accurate as to what hipsters are like. There's stuff that just is, I guess, set up to be funny but isn't, and then there's just stuff that's kind of stupid at first, and then it's so stupid that it gets a laugh out of you, and I think the filmmakers are aware that we'll get like one laugh, so they'll sure as hell drive it into the ground. Benedict Cumberbatch shows up as an androgynous, what's the character's name? All. The character's name is All, I guess ALL, because the character is supposed to encapsulate all, female, male, whatever. He's just made up to look like very like, yeah, androgynous. Like he's got no eyebrows, just got long flowing hair. He's just like looking at everyone like an alien, essentially. And yeah, that's kind of funny to see Benedict Cumberbatch made up like that and acting like that. And he's introduced to Derek and Hansel by the hipster asshole. And so the hipster asshole's monologue is like going over this, saying like, hey man, are you judging All? Are you judging All? Would you be offended if your son like fell in love with All and decided to marry them and everything like that? And it's just focusing on Zoolander's face. Okay, this isn't funny. What is like, just cut to Cumberbatch's face, and every once in a while he'll like be just staring at Derek and being like, simplest little thing that does it. But then you have to have this fast-talking representation of the new generation of cynics, basically doing what cynics do. And I do understand the irony because I'm being very cynical on this movie right now. Sorry. You've got that going on over stuff that is legitimately funny for a moment and not cutting away from it and just driving the joke into the ground. And to the point where I'm like, okay, can we please move on from All? Can we go to something else now? Because it's run its course. This is something that was kind of bugging me too about this whole movie with regards to kind of its approach to its material as opposed to what the original probably intended. When you're kind of lampooning the fashion industry and pop culture in general, that you're gonna have important faces show up and very famous people and gorgeous celebrities and everything like that are going to show up for cameos. And you work with those cameos as best as you can to either incorporate them into the narrative or to give them like a long-lasting impression and performance that, you know what, is memeable. Billy Zane does show up again, and he does fine as kind of both Hansel and Derek's spiritual guide in the beginning. He like brings them back from being recluses, and it is cool to see Billy Zane again. But the thing is that when Billy Zane was a cameo in the first movie, he really wasn't that relevant then either, but you could kind of understand why they would include him in the movie, if that makes any sense. Because Billy Zane is a very fashionable looking guy, he's a very handsome man. It seems like he would be kind of one of those people you would see at big fashion events, or he would take a great interest in fashion events and things like that. So it makes sense to incorporate him in the actual movie in some way. But at no point even in the first Zoolander did it feel like, oh, Billy Zane is really popular right now. Hey everyone, remember that really big year and a half that Billy Zane was all anyone could talk about? Even for his like biggest hit, which I believe is Titanic, he's not like the one thing everyone talks about from Titanic. It makes sense that they would utilize him as a persona for that movie without it being too distracting. I hope I'm making sense of this because it really bothered me about this movie. So his inclusion in the world of Zoolander makes sense. And you know what? Justin Bieber's inclusion in the world of Zoolander also makes sense. Like, it opens up with Justin Bieber's murder. And instantly I get the joke. I'm like, they're gonna focus on Justin Bieber being riddled with bullets for about 30 seconds. Because that's the joke, is that everyone hates Bieber so much that we're gonna focus on his death a whole hell of a lot. And sure enough, once you know what, I predicted it again. It happened. I'm not even ragging on this movie because they included Bieber in it. It makes sense, because Bieber's a very fashionable guy, sure. Say what you will about him being a douchebag or a pop idol or whatever, but, you know, he's involved with stuff like fashion and things like that. It makes sense for his persona to be included in this movie. But then when you just have throwaway cameo from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I mean like completely throwaway. Hansel's up on a balcony like screaming, "Who am I?" because he's having his morality conflict with his orgy and another orgy, which has Christina Hendricks in it, by the way, so. And then he's yelling across at Derek, who's having his own, like, moral crisis on another rooftop. And then you cut to Katy Perry, who's just on a rooftop in Rome somewhere yelling about something or singing about something, and they're both like, "Hey, Katy Perry, what's your moral dilemma?" And she's tells him, like, "Oh, it's just so hard being us." "I know." And then all of a sudden, Derek's like, "What do you think, Neil?" And then there's Neil deGrasse Tyson on another roof being like, "Well, Derek, no one can really answer those questions." And he gets into his whole, like, yeah, universal ideas and cosmos. Because that's why he's there, is because cosmos was a big thing, and this, I'm sure this whole thing with him and Bob, B.O.B. or whatever, about Earth being flat and shit, and I'm sure that's great timing on their part to release this film during that, because that won't date this at all. And that's the thing, I like Neil deGrasse Tyson, I think Katy Perry's perfectly fine, but there's no point to them being there. When Justin Bieber's inclusion in the story makes way more sense than having Neil deGrasse Tyson or Katy Perry there, something's wrong. And that's the thing, it's like there's cameos all over the place for the sake of cameos. They don't have to make rhyme or reason. They don't have to be about anything, but they're just there. And I'm not including like people who are playing characters. Like Benedict Cumberbatch as all, that's fine. That's a good like 1 minute joke, and that's cool. You never see him again. Kristen Wiig shows up a little bit here and there. She's kind of wasted in this film actually, because her whole shtick is that she's made up in goofy clothing. She doesn't walk anywhere, she just glides everywhere, and that you can't understand what she's saying. Like literally, I think that's the joke, and you're supposed to be laughing at that, but honestly, like to the point that, yeah, the characters don't understand what she's saying, but I don't understand what she's saying, so how can I laugh at anything? And she's trying, she's making the most of it, but there's just nothing for her to work with on that. That's the gag, is that you can't comprehend anything she's saying. Woo. I guess I am a little mad at this movie, I guess. It seemed like a really kind of wasted effort, and along the lines of stuff like Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, or even Anchorman 2, which thankfully that worked out and it is actually funny. But like stuff like this, I don't know why this took so long to come to theaters, and I didn't think there would be that big a demand for it. I understand why Ben Stiller took time away from it, obviously, if it had to do with his writing partner on it, on the original, passing away, and he's just like, I don't want to come back to those characters, it reminds me to. I get that. But I really wasn't clamoring for a sequel to Zoolander. And in my mind, I guess the sequel never really happened, because I like just to think that we pull away from the Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Read Good, and the end. Happy ending. It just goes through the motions, really. And that, I feel is its biggest kind of sin, in a way, is that it's just by the numbers shtick that happens with cameos that are unnecessary, but hey, they're a thing right now. You enjoy this because they're a thing right now, right? Like I was saying before about the world of Zoolander. The most outlandish thing, and by outlandish I mean most unrealistic thing that happened in the last movie, was that his look of Magnum can stop a throwing star in midair. Okay, that's one gag and it's done. It did its job and it worked. But apparently, that's just a superpower that people have in this world now. And I'm not kidding. The whole finale of this movie hinges on Magnum from Zoolander, a look that his son has, the fire on his face or whatever is what they call it, and Hansel and his long-lost father Sting, playing himself, their model looks stopping a bomb in midair from falling into a pit of lava. And this is just something that happens. It made sense in the first movie because everyone was building up about like, oh, there's this new look Derek's working on, Magnum, and they're all the same look. That's the gag, yeah, sure. But they're just expecting projectiles to stop straight up because he gives a look. Like, you've seen it in the trailers of Owen Wilson throwing shit at Ben Stiller. He's like, come on man, train, and shit like that, and he's throwing like a bottle of tequila at his face and it hits him, haha, because You know, he's expecting the tequila to stop in midair because he's giving it the Magnum look. When they're just expecting that to happen, I was just like, what reality are we working in now, and why, and how can it still be funny? Seeing Ben Stiller get hit in the face with stuff works for me for about 0.5 seconds, and then I get tired of it. And sure enough, I'm sure the one joke that probably should have got me but didn't was when Mugatu's throwing a sacrificial knife at his son because he believes that if he cuts out his son's heart and drinks the blood, that's the fountain of youth. There's a long, and thank God Mugatu even realizes at the end of the movie, like tells everyone at the end of the movie, that's complete crap. Like, who would believe this stupid story? Because I was like, this is stupid. Even for Zoolander, this is stupid. But he's throwing this knife. As it's happening in slow motion, I'm like, okay, Ben Stiller's gonna get a knife in the face, because Magnum's not gonna work on this. And sure enough, Ben Stiller gets a knife in the face. It doesn't work, and it's totally undermined by the fact that at the very end, essentially, male models have the Force, is what it is. I get that it's just supposed to be so stupid that I just go along for the ride, but I just couldn't at that point. That stuff like that works in other farcical comedies like Anchorman and stuff, where they have established that just weird shit will happen. So I don't know, it's weird to say that. Like, it becomes more, you become more accepting of it with other comedies as opposed to, you know, the established world in this comedy. When the craziest thing that happens in the first movie is him stopping a throwing star with this look, like it's just an everyday occurrence now. When clearly that was kind of what the movie was building up to, was that his looks are just so incredible, he can stop projectiles. I don't know. Kiefer was really good in this. Bottom line, if you're a fan of the first Zoolander, you may still enjoy it. I'm not a diehard Zoolander fan. I liked it, and I guess I still do like it. I just prefer not to think of this as a continuation of it and just some kind of oopsie accident. But if you are just so into everything Derek Zoolander, you may enjoy this. I just can't think of anyone who's just so gung-ho about that movie. Sure, it's quotable and the characters are funny and memorable. There are probably fan sites out there, but I can't remember like a diehard like Zoolander fan site out there. Again, comment me and prove me wrong. But it's just that this was just really limp-wristed and lame. Honestly, was a sequel I wasn't really clamoring for. I don't know who was clamoring for this. It's pretty weak. Not enough like the way Dumb and Dumber 2 worked on me, where I found myself actually looking back on the original and kind of regretting that I laughed at that now that I see it now in more adult context. But I was already 18 when Zoolander came out, so I feel I had established like what can constitute as funny for me, what I can tolerate and what I can't. This one, nah. I'm not up in arms angry about it. I'm disappointed, honestly. That's all I can really say about it. It can make Justin Bieber work in the movie, but it can't make Neil deGrasse Tyson work. What the hell?